the background. Let's. I'm contemplating opening a third bottle of wine. Let's carry on before I fucking pass out.
And I would like to add for a second that this is also what a lot of foreign volunteers have said about their experience in Ukraine, is that they felt like the underdog this time. Like, a lot of them fought in the Middle East, but it was shocking to them that this time they don't have the firepower. They don't have all the medevac and all the good stuff that they had in the past. And a lot of them didn't like it, actually.
Like, I'm not going to quote the entire article, but all the Ukrainian volunteers foreign volunteers to Ukraine that I've spoken to or have been interviewed by major and minor press outlets actually, don't really seem to agree with this statement here. I'll leave a few links in the comments. You're free to go read them yourself. They are fascinating readings. I'm wondering which volunteers he is speaking, because there were quite a few, shall we say, gun-ho people who went there, like people who had no military experience but wanted to help out and had their own gun. And a lot of them arrived thinking that they would just be support elements, or they would be snipers, or that they would be backroom medics and support staff. And like they were shoved on the front lines, and they were digging trenches, and they were actively fighting Russians right from day one. And I know that surprised a lot of those people, but you know, that's because they didn't have any kind of concept of war to begin with, you know, which is always going to happen in any war when you have breeding troops, when you have troops there that have no combat experience and have not been properly prepared. I mean, there is a reason that especially this guy up here, Mr. New Atlas, should know this, because he was a former Marine. He should know that one of the things they do in the Marines is they put you in a field and they blow up the field around you. They have machine gun firing over your head, because that is a fucking terrifying experience. That will make you wet your fucking pants. And unless you get over that urge to get out of the trench and run, you will never survive combat. As much as we want to make fun of these people for being arrogant, stupid little shits who thought they could just sit behind a barrel and camp the Russian army with impunity, you know, it's like fucking Call of Duty, you know? It's the fact that they are actually in the trenches, standing their fucking grounds, fighting day after day after day, that's admirable. And I admire people who have gone out and done that, because as I do like to remind people all the time who do make fun of these people, they are out there. You're not. And it's very easy to judge people like that when you're sitting in your quiet, air-conditioned suburban home and you're not in a fucking muddy trench outside Kharkiv.
Didn't like it, actually.
It's almost like the Russians have a completely modern army, and it's very formidable.
The modernization of Russia's military began in 2014. Prior to this, UK intelligence estimated that around 10% of Russia's military was to a modern standard, the rest being a combination of conscripts and poorly motivated, poorly trained recruits using older Soviet-era equipment. The modernization program was designed to increase this to around 40%, with set to finish in 2024. The army was pegged to have around 2,300 of the newer T-14 type tank models, yet less than 20 currently exist. The same can be said of the Su-75 Femboy. 55 supposed to now be in service, but only 2 prototypes currently exist. Both of these projects fell into severe development hell, with lack of funds, corruption in the planning process, and a general lack of industry and expertise blamed for their continued delay. As a result, the Russian army was forced to fall back on upgraded versions of older Soviet vehicles, such as the T-80U and the T-90M, both of which rely on Western components to complete these upgrades, that do little to negate the problems with their current protection systems, such as explosive reactive armor, IR dazzlers, and the so-called coke cages, all of which were outdated decades ago as concepts and have proven to be largely ineffective against the more modern and even outdated NATO anti-tank equipment, the same equipment that these tanks were designed to fight. To put that in comparison, the British reservists train and operate the Challenger 2, one of the most powerful NATO tanks currently in service that has only recently started to show its age. To put these reservists in the same comparable vehicles as Russian frontline, modern and formidable troops, they would need to be equipped with the Vickers Mark III, a tank from the 60s upgraded to fight tanks from the 70s, to which, according to its primary user Kenya, is actually a considerably more rugged and reliable tank than the T-72, a tank supposedly superior that is still in use by the Russian armed forces by some of its more elite units, such as the 4th Guards Armored, which is one of the most modern, best equipped, best trained, and most experienced. The most modern and elite of Russian troops, the VDV, which includes the Spetsnaz, the supposed equal to the SES, have almost entirely been wiped out. The 1st Guards Armoured, Russia's best armoured division, is now down to 100 men who have remained on the Russian side of the border since pulling back from Kiev. The 4th Guards Armoured, the 3rd Guards Motorized, reportedly both have casualty rates of 50%. The 74th Separate Guards Motor Rifle Brigade, who attempted to cross the Dontex River back in May, suffered a nearly 90% casualty rate and lost 80 of their armoured vehicles in one battle. So modern? Not yet. Formidable? In comparison to Syrian rebels, yes. In comparison to a modern, well-equipped, well-dug-in army, no.
And I point this out on many occasions, is the stuff that we're giving the Ukrainians, even the really high-level stuff we're giving the Ukrainians, like HIMARS, MLRS systems. Those are, those are universally really just reconstitution of capability they've lost earlier in the war. I mean, it's not like the Ukrainians didn't have some very formidable Soviet MLRS systems or their own post-Soviet developments of MLRS systems. For instance, the Smerch system, which the Ukrainians had a number of pre-war, and I think most of those have been destroyed by now. But that's a more capable system than the HIMARS.
What? The Smerch is a good system. For the 90s, maybe. But its primary purpose was to fire a large number of missiles onto one target, and then retreat. The HIMARS can do the same, but it has the option to fire at multiple targets and hit very precise locations. It was built for an age when every dictator on the planet that America wants to fight would put large strategical targets in the middle of cities. So when America hits these sites, they can film all the dead civilians that lived around it and go, "Oh, isn't America bad? Oh." This is where my expertise starts to come in. See, a lot of people know this by now, some of you may not. I used to work for British military intelligence. Nothing fancy, I wasn't a 00 agent or whatever. My job was to predict civilian response to hypothetical scenarios. If you have an ammo dump or a fuel dump in the middle of a city surrounded by civilians, you cannot blow it up, or you end up with hundreds of dead civilians. So you have to find ways of putting that facility out of action, which is why you hit the roads leading into it, you hit the pumps, you hit the trucks, all things that can disable a facility without blowing up its contents. That's the strength of the HIMARS system. It can perform these pinpoint precision strikes very cheaply, and Russia agrees, considering they're replacing their highly advanced and capable Smerch system with something called the Tornado, which operates on the same principle. Another major advantage of the HIMARS of the Smerch is it can be reloaded in the field very quickly. We're talking in minutes. The Smerch has to retreat, it has to go to a place with special vehicles, it can take about 40 minutes to reload one of these things. You can reload the HIMARS with a fucking forklift. The Ukrainians still have and still operate the Smerch. I don't know where they're getting this idea that they've all been destroyed by now. I mean, the charities signmyrocket.com will happily write your name and a message onto one of the Smerch rockets before they fire it.
Considerably so. And
wait, Tyler, sorry to interrupt. Let me get this straight. The multiple launch rocket systems that they had before were more capable than remaining. The HIMARS that they're deploying now?
Yes, actually, one specific system, the BM-30 Smerch. That's a larger, longer ranged, and generally more capable system than U.S. MLRS. It's now most of those systems have since been destroyed, but I mean, in a lot of senses, what we're doing with a lot of this military aid is we're just reconstituting capability the Ukrainians had earlier and they lost.
But Tyler, I have a question. From what I read online, some people said that the advantage of the HIMARS is that they can be reloaded faster within 5 minutes. You just put the box, you remove the box, and you put a new one, whereas the Smerch takes longer. This is from what I read.
Star! You get a fucking gold star! History of Legends may actually redeem himself here. He may actually know what he's talking about. Oh, fuck me!
That, I'm not actually super familiar with how fast you can reload a HIMARS, but if you look at the...
If you don't know how long it takes to reload an artillery system, then you are unfamiliar with that artillery system! Which means you don't know what the fuck you're talking about!
The tactics they're using, they're not reloading those things and trying to shoot them rapidly. They're reloading them deep in the rear. So they'll drive out to a firing point, maybe 50, 60 miles, and then they'll fire them. They'll unload them, then they'll immediately speed off. So they're not trying to rapidly run pods through them.
So it's basically shoot and scoot because their counter battery fire is so effective that if they stay in one position very long, they'll just be incinerated, right?
Oh yeah, because you see a rocket launcher that size, it fires off. It's not only, not only can those projectiles be tracked with like a counter battery radar, but also it's a giant rocket launch. So anybody who's looking out across the battlefield can see this thing fire. That's going to attract a lot of attention because it's a very high value target.
At what range, more or less, could you see such a launcher?
You can see that as far as visibility goes. So if you're out say north of Kherson, and there's 20-mile visibility. It's a large smoke trail going off in the distance. You could anyone with optics can immediately see that. And
all right, the challenge for you kids is to pinpoint the exact location of a truck 20 miles away within the few minutes that it would take to drive away. Can you do that?
Probably start calling fire on them immediately.
Yes, because as we all know, every single Russian on the battlefield has memorized the grid coordinates and grid references of the entirety of Ukraine, to the point where if they see a truck 50 miles away, because remember, he said these things drive within 50 miles of their targets and then fire, they can see that truck with just regular optics and know exactly where it is, know the exact reference grid to call in a precision artillery strike immediately. I'm going to be skipping the rest of what this guy says because he literally just treads over the same fucking ground that he just said earlier. I'm letting him talk the most because, quite frankly, he doesn't actually say anything. He just kind of constantly repeats himself and then just goes over what everyone else has said and says, yeah, I agree, because, and then, refuses to fucking elaborate. As I've said before, I think I've said before, the entire video is linked to the description. You can free to go and watch it yourself without my comments, without my judgment, and judge for yourself if that's what you want to do.
I want to step back a little bit, because this is the thing. Everybody says that the Ukrainian army, the Ukrainian armed force, were 600,000 men at the beginning, but this includes everything. A territorial defense force, cops, border patrol, everything. But the actual combat army, I do believe, was a number that I kept hearing was 230,000. And that the Russians essentially went in with an expeditionary force of 190,000 spread over essentially 6 fronts. There was the Kiev front, Chuyev, Sumy, Kharkov, the Donbass, but that was supported by also the DPR and LPR forces, and Kherson, right? How is it possible that this essentially expeditionary force, 6 months later or 5 months later, is so, categorically winning this war?
He thinks Russia's winning the war. Gonzalo Rila thinks Russia is winning the war. There's a lot to unpack here. Primarily, he thinks Russia's winning the war. And that does not go on to explain how he has come to this miraculous conclusion that Russia is somehow winning this war. Okay, but he does ask everyone else that question, why is this? And any of them don't immediately bitch slap him down with the full force of logic, which is that is a very subjective opinion that I might have to force open the 5th emergency bottle of wine and drink it with the 4th one. But let's let the others explain. Let's give everyone a chance to speak. Because I want to go over what he said earlier. Because he got pretty much all of the numbers wrong. I don't know where he got that 600,000 from. Actually, give me a second here. Okay, the 600,000 number is a quote from the blog Seymour Rocks, who is also trying to highlight to me the dangers of chemtrails, who is quoting Scott Ritter, a former Marine Corps intelligence officer who has been arrested twice for sexual harassment of a minor, and is an avid supporter and contributor of Russia Today. He was one of the main spreaders of the fake BBC news footage claiming Ukraine was responsible for the massacres of civilians in Bucha. Not exactly the most credible source. So for the benefit of everyone here, Ukraine's army at the start of this conflict was about 200,000 armed personnel, roughly 50,000 non-combatives, that's anyone from a medic to a civil servant who works at the Ministry of Defence, and about 60,000 National Guard units. That gives us a rough total of 260,000 combat-capable personnel. Russia has 1.3 million soldiers in active service, of which roughly 500,000 are non-combatives. This includes medics, officers, high-ranking generals, various ceremonial positions, technicians, war planners, members of Russia's intelligence agency, the NOT, KGB, the mechanics and guards of the Komplinka Tank Museum, leaving us with about 850,000. Out of those 850,000, 250,000 are paramilitary. This includes military police, border guards, gulag prison guards, customs officers, etc., and another 250,000 are reservists. These range from conscripts to soldiers that have been retired but can be recalled by the state if necessary. That leaves us with 350 actual combat-ready soldiers. 180,000 of these soldiers were earmarked for the Ukrainian invasion, and by the 8th of March, the Pentagon and the CIA reported that 100% of these forces had been deployed. As of the 11th of June, this number has grown to 330,000. 80,000 are reservists and 70,000 are from non-combat roles that have been pushed into frontline service. This number does not include conscripts that have been brought in to fill up ranks, militia groups such as the DNR, foreign volunteer groups such as Chechnya and Syria, or the Wagner Group. So no, Mr. Lira 11, I think you'll find that Russia greatly outnumbers Ukraine, not the other way around. But let's see what everyone else has to say. You know, we could be surprised here. I've already given it 1 gold star. Can I give it a second? Let's find out.
I'll throw this out to the three of you, but if you want, Brian, if you have any ideas, because I'm really trying to get a grip on how this happened that they're so clearly winning.
I'm not really sure, when the conflict started, how many soldiers were on both sides.
Okay. If you don't know a fact that is so easily Googled, because both sides regularly reported their army numbers to the UN each year prior to the war, while having the audacity to earlier say you've been reading the US Congress transcripts about the HIMARS, then you're either a shit journalist or you're being willfully ignorant. Which one is it?
Started how many soldiers were on both sides. I've seen a lot of different numbers. That could very well be the case.
Ah, yes, this argument. Oh, there's been a lot of conflicting data sources. We might never know the real answer. I've heard so many different things from so many different people. That is the dying calls of someone who has realized that what they believed was wrong and is now having to admit it, but doesn't have the fucking balls to do it. This fucker knows that the 600,000 number is wrong. He fucking knows. He's smart enough to read the UN reports and the fucking Ministry of Defense of Ukraine's official website and know exactly what the number is, but he's not ready to admit that in his mind, Russian propaganda, weirdo conspiracy theorists, the UN, and a fucking child rapist are all equal levels of credibility. I'm going to let him talk for a few minutes and then I'm going to cut him off because I've listened to what he says on this subject matter prior to me recording this. Everything he is about to say is completely, unequivocally bullshit. I want you to listen to it and I'll wait to the end and then explain, alright?
But what's for certain, Ukraine started the conflict out. That was the strongest their army was going to be. That was the result of 7 to 8 years of US and other NATO countries coming in and training them, equipping them, sending arms in. That whole time they were building these fortifications along the line of contact, the Donbas region, and Russia is still advancing. They're advancing against that army when it was at its height, and they are crossing the most heavily defended part of Ukraine right now. They're still advancing. Ukraine has been unable to stop them. So at this point, however many soldiers they started this out with, at this point, that the best trained soldiers that they had, they're gone, and that's going to be very hard to replace. You can't just replace officers and NCOs quickly. That's not something you can make in a factory and ship over. That takes time to